Hey, I'm Chris Thile.
Noam Pikelny.
We're Punch Brothers, and you're watching Grammy Pro. Well, I think bluegrass is a great place to start. It's where the five of us started. I guess arguably with the exception of Paul, we all basically grew up with bluegrass music. So I liken it to being, like we've got, like an artist has a palette, and you've got these certain colors to work with. But of course, you can think of anything to do with those colors. We have bluegrass colors on the palette. But what we actually choose to do with those colors is, it's fairly broad.
What drew us together as a band is, initially, a decade ago, is the fact that we played these instruments. We comprised the bluegrass ensemble as far as the instrumentation, but the fact that within the band we had this broad range of musical interests. I think early on, there was one of the first things that we geeked out over was Radiohead.
Yeah.
And so here are five guys playing bluegrass instruments.
So the two of us at 4 or 5 in the morning at a bluegrass festival in Colorado, go back to the hotel and actually started playing Paranoid Android, in the middle of playing, St. Anne's Reel or some iconic fiddle tune like that. And then Pickles goes some Radiohead, huh? And yeah, I love Radiohead. And then the next thing you know, that's just as easy to get into for the two of us as St. Anne's Reel was. And it's those kind of serendipitous moments. Not that the five of us have the same taste, but that we share, I'd say, very diffuse tastes.
Yeah, and I think the inception of the band, it was so clear what we had in common of we all love these same bands. And I think one of the things as we've kind of matured and evolved as a band, one of the things that's really rewarding is having this brain trust of people pitching music that they're geeking out about to each other. And so Chris will bring stuff to the band, so you got to hear this. Have you heard this new record? Whether it's Thomas Addis or D'Angelo, and and we'll be able to bounce stuff off of each other, and I'll bring some really
the Buck
hard to
Owens,
find Western Swing or Buck Owens, and the listening parties on the bus are really fun. And so I think at the inception, it was really, I think what drew us together was the fact that we had these direct, common kind of fanboy appreciation of some of these bands. But what's kept it interesting is the fact that we're not really all laser beam on the exact same thing.
We're that's the best. Because the more you listen to music, the more obsessed you become with what you determine to be great music, the more you realize that great instances of music are more alike than they are not alike. They share more core values than they do with other instances of lesser music in the same genre. So that the greatest examples of any given genre, in my mind, they rise to the top of that genre and enter into a super genre of good music, and it's those people, the people that are those musics that are in that super genre are actually fairly similar in a lot of ways, and just aesthetically they're different. But at their core, their beating heart is actually very similar. It did. 5 different processes for the 5 different records. I'd say there's always they're great. You want to work. We've so far not worked with the same producer twice. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, different producer each time.
The same studio.
Never consecutive
twice.
Same studio, but we returned to Ocean Way Studios in Hollywood a couple times. I think, with the exception of the last 2 records, we've never been a band that has lived in the studio. Some bands go into the studio for months or a year, and they'll make their record will find itself while they're in the studio.
Yeah.
Our writing process or pre-production process, if I get points for using industry terms,
strong pre-production
points. It usually happens long before we're in the studio, and whether it's one of our houses or back when we were in New York, one of our apartments, we spent a lot of time working about music and talking about music well before we get to the studio. And the studio usually is the chance for this music to see its kind of see itself to final fruition. And I think the
it's
last
like you'll
few
get the last. We might get the last 2 or 3% of a thing in the studio, but it is what it is before we get there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love it. I love referring to it as a track. That's good. That's as it should be.
Yeah.
It's a track.
Yeah. It's a good cut.
It's a good cut. It's a tune. It is. It's a tune. It's like an unwieldy beast of a tune. That was what started the band. Basically, I had this idea kicking around before I met these guys of just wanting to write some sort of a long, through composed-ish piece, but that spoke to the skill set of, you know, what is kind of, in a way it's a new kind of musician, but also in a way it's a return to what I think musicians ought to be and used to be, which is you know, we should have a lot of overview as musicians. We should be able to perform. We should be able to write. We should be able to improvise. We should be able to read music. We should be able to, you know, this is our art. We should, you know, we should be able to kind of do the things that one can do. And so the idea was to try and write a piece that spoke to that sort of musician that's coming up, where it's a you're marrying the learned and intuitive approaches to music making, that they shouldn't be perceived as separate. We shouldn't, as musicians, segregate ourselves from the other side of things. Like, if just because you can read music doesn't mean that you can't, you know, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to just let it rip. And just because you can let it rip doesn't mean you should be able to read music. Like, that's not going to rob you of your soul. And like, having a bunch of facility isn't going to rob you of your soul. You know, it's only going to make everything better.
My only regret from that whole phase is that we never went online and got ordained as a reverend, so you could legally have married folk and formal music. That, like,
strong.
That's one of my regrets. But let's not dwell on the past, you know? Looking forward.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah. Shouldn't dwell on the past.
Boy, it's there's such a mix. Like, there could be half the band could be doing something that is arranged to the bitter end, while half of the band is doing something that's completely spontaneous. I think it's all contingent on the song, about the context. I think the guiding force with Punch Brothers has always been, like, it's more important to serve the song than to serve our own interests to be playing or to be improvising. And so the times that there is a long solo, it's because that's really what the song was calling for at that time. And when there are arranged parts, that's what the song needed. What's interesting is when those lines get blurred, when there's a solo, a spot on a record, like on Familiarity, which is the opening track on our newest record, The Phosphorescent Blues. There's a fiddle solo that is on the end of the song, when the song kind of becomes more of a slow ballad. And it was an improvised fiddle solo. It was always conceived as an improvised fiddle solo. And he played something in the studio that was so definitive that he kind of screwed himself, because, like, you will never live up to that again if you try to play anything else. And so that was an improvised moment.
At the same time now.
An improvised moment that now is scored as if he, you know, got out his quill.
It might as well be a written part. Whereas conversely, there are things that we've imagined as being, like, set in stone that time erodes, and you just go, you know what? I have kind of a different concept for this now, or even I don't necessarily have a different concept, but I just want to mess with it. Yeah. I just want to mess with this aspect of this, you know, every night. I think that'd be a fun thing to change every night. Yeah. And you know, the end of this girl is that, like, that was there was a set amount of time. It was an arranged thing, but live it just turned into a fun moment to just kind of expand on. And that is, I think that's where the guts of the thing lie in how rewarding it can be to just get in there and start going like that.
Right.
With with those two different ostensibly opposing forces, the spontaneous and the worked out.
Well, the way we play music and arrange music is really based on everybody's voice on their instrument, and so just by the nature of having a different person, that would completely change the sound of the band. And an instrument as structural as the bass is in an ensemble, like Punch Brothers.
That's true. You build it. I mean, it's like a house. It's like changing the foundation of a house. It's a big change.
Yeah, and both, our original bass player, Greg Garrison, came from a completely different world. He was more from a jazz world and more from the bluegrass world. And our next bass player, current bass player, who's now been with us for 7 years or something like this. It's been a long time. I came from more of a classical world. But
with a keen interest in the other stuff.
Absolutely. And maybe even more of a keen interest than any of our interest in traditional music.
Fascinated by it in the same way that actually the four of us are maybe kind of fascinated by classical music as people who didn't grow up with it. You prize what you prize what's not yours.
But it's like all comedians want to be musicians and all musicians want to be comedians. It's the same thing. It's like all pickers want to be maestros and all maestros want to be pickers. Don't quote me on that.
I mean, I guess that's impossible to say, but I do think that New York, living in New York, it was a wonderful place for us to sort of hunker down and come up with why we would do our thing. I think that places always have a tangible impact on what you're doing. That's one of the reasons that we did on the last record that we had these writing sessions where we would pointedly go to places that we loved and just hang out for a week and kind of work 9 to 5 on the music, and then go out into the city and play and get a feel for it. Like Charleston, South Carolina was one of them. Telluride, Colorado was another. We did one in New York. Although, we have. I think there was a very idyllic time for us right when Paul, our bass player now, joined the band, and we were all in New York. Everyone had moved to New York, and everyone was also relatively footloose and fancy free. Like, there just weren't. Now we have wives, we have kids. There's all kinds of.
Sorry.
No wife or child for you.
Well, we're not sure when this is going to air.
That's true. The night is young. But it was a really wonderful time for us where we would work on music and then go out into the big bad city and experience, definitely one of mankind's greatest achievements is New York City, and also one of our like something that we might want to sweep, a lot of the things we might want to sweep under the rug are in New York City as well, and I think all of it can be a beautiful celebration of humanity, and that at its best is what music is a celebration of humanity and the spirit of creativity, emulating whatever force it is that has brought all of this into being. Like that, I think that's what music is. I think that's in the last analysis, we make things for each other. I think we all do that. We make things for each other, and I think that's a beautiful impulse. And there's a lot of that on display in New York City. To me, you can evaluate a festival not based on the moments in your set that are kind of the most boisterous and exuberant. You can evaluate a festival based on like how does the crowd react to the more withdrawn moments, like the moments where you're bringing things down to a whisper. You're actually attempting to actually kind of communicate something intimate with people. And I think about playing the WC tonight, playing we have a song called Julep that's that requires some attention from the crowd, and absolutely rose to the occasion. I think also just practical things like the stages are offset enough from each other. Like I didn't hear any of the other stages, and that's, I mean, honestly, I'm ready to say right here and right now that like Bonnaroo and the other super festivals need to work on the whole sound bleed thing. It's absolutely horrid. Like, what the hell are we there for if not to listen to music? But not to listen to 3 things at once?
Have you ever considered playing an electric mandolin?
So that I can make it 4 things.
That's right. That way you could be on the offensive as well.
But honestly, this is such a welcome. It's a welcome festival in the neighborhood. And I mean, I love playing the big festivals, but I desperately want them to work on the sound bleed issue, and that like more is not better, louder is not always more impactful. Like we gotta work on this. Festivals are amazing. The ability to show up somewhere for a weekend and take in, 25 things or whatever it is. But like, let's make sure that each of those 25 things we can actually hear. Like, let's work on that. This is a great place to hear music.
They did a really good job with this. And it's just, Nashville obviously is such an incredible music town. And I think because of the proximity to Nashville, you have a lot of musicians playing the festival that probably wouldn't have traveled very far to do a set. Like the talent on the bill here is pretty spectacular, and I think it's really neat to see the people who come out to a festival when it's just kind of in their backyard. And it's beautiful, beautiful countryside here, and I'm really happy to see that they put a festival here instead of like a Panera or something. It's just, they did well.
Better festival over Panera Bread.